Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, whenever you are watching this. I wish you a fantastic day. So this is right now. This is Friday morning for me, and as you know, Friday morning is interesting because, um, because of the snow day that everyone else has, but we're here, and so in light of all these things, I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to recapture what we didn't quite finish, or what I felt like I was rushing at the end of the last video, part one. So this is Washington's foreign policy, part two. We're really going to focus on Washington's farewell address. That's the bulk of this video. And so something that we read in class at the end of the hour, some classes didn't even get there at the end of the hour on Wednesday. And so Washington's farewell address is his way of saying, please, please don't elect me president. We'll get there. I also wanted to capture, just reconnect with those two treaties that also kind of helped define Washington's foreign policy, but also weren't really fully that well mentioned in the textbook. So the first one is the Jay Treaty, and again, I want to remind you that Great Britain is at war with France because of the French Revolution, and so because of that delicate situation, we were trying to stay neutral. That was Washington's official policy, was neutrality. Now, in spite of that, Great Britain is pressuring us because they still have soldiers in forts in the Ohio River Valley. And that's, again, that's the western part of the United States. That's the Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan area. Right? They still have forts that are being occupied by French or by British soldiers. They promised in the Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolution, they promised to remove themselves from those forts, but they didn't. They kind of went back on that, saying we'll stay there until you are in debt to us. We still have some states that have significant war debt owed to the British, and so they're kind of going back on their treaty, saying we're going to stay until you repay those debts, and that Washington needed to rectify this issue. We can't have a good standing with any country in the world until we get rid of the British from their forts, from our nation. And so in this treaty, the Jay Treaty, again, John Jay is the Chief Justice of the United States. He's an old Federalist. One of the guys that wrote the Federalist Papers with Hamilton and Madison. He goes over and negotiates this treaty, and basically says, yes, we will give Great Britain status, most favored nation trading status, if they remove themselves from their forts on our land. And that's an agreement that's made. This Treaty of Amity, Commerce, and Navigation is negotiated, and John Jay is very unhappy for him. Right? This has a hard time. This barely passes the Senate with a 20-10 vote. This is unpopular. Now, the reason why it's unpopular, remember, is because most of the United States is pro-French. This is also at the same time, just shortly after Citizen Genet is going through the United States and stirring up public opinion in support for the French. So the Jay Treaty is unpopular because it's pro-British. Pinckney's Treaty is more popular. However, it's a treaty with Spain. Spain is an ally of Great Britain against France. So this is more popular because it's a bit more beneficial to Southerners. Pinckney's Treaty, as a reminder, it helped settle that boundary in the area, the region in southwest United States, today what we call Mississippi and Alabama. This region here, this circled area, it gave us free navigation of the Mississippi River and an ability, a right of deposit is what it's called. It's an ability for our ships to sail down and out the Mississippi River into the port of New Orleans and into the Atlantic Ocean as needed. It gives our farmers an ability to sell their goods and such in New Orleans to be sold to the eastern coast. That's a super important deal, and that's a treaty with Spain. That's all I wanted to say about that. Good. Now, President Washington, as we know, serves only 2 terms. He sets this precedent for all future presidents. Sorry, I said something happened. I wasn't sure what was going on there. So Washington sets this precedent for all future presidents, that after 2 terms, a president is supposed to not run for president again. Um, every president has an opportunity to be reelected, but when Washington steps down here, he makes it clear that 2 terms is enough. He himself is getting old, and he doesn't. Remember, he didn't want to. He was the only president that didn't have to run for president. He's the only guy that never had to campaign. And so um, as Washington decides to step down, uh, Jefferson serves 2 terms, Madison serves 2 terms, Monroe serves 2 terms. Any of them could have served another one, but Jefferson probably wouldn't have been reelected. But they all could have had a 3rd term. They chose not to because that's the precedent that was set. Until Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1940, when he was running for president, that was his 4th term. Actually, we go back in 1936. Roosevelt ran for a 3rd term, was successfully elected. Roosevelt was super popular. He never had an issue being elected. All of his elections were won by landslide. The 1940 election was rough. His fourth reelection wasn't as of a blowout. The 22nd Amendment made this a constitutional reality. This 2-term idea. In 1951, Congress passed the 22nd Amendment, which basically said 2 terms is all you can serve as president. Actually, they say 10 years or 2 terms. 2 terms or 10 years. Now, I want to focus the remainder of our time on Washington's farewell address, his specific statement to the American people, stating that I no longer want to be president. He opens it with this, and much of this address is actually credited to Alexander Hamilton. Not that Washington didn't have anything to do with it, but Hamilton was the one who drafted it in its complete entirety, and Washington would have guided him along the way on what he wanted to say. But he starts with this statement, and I want you to see how he addresses the people that I don't want to be elected. He says, friends and fellow citizens, the period for a new election of a citizen to administer the executive government of the United States being not far distant, and the time actually arrived when your thoughts must be employed in designating the person who is to be clothed with that important trust, it appears to me proper, especially as it may conduce to a more distinct expression of the public voice, that I should now apprise you of the resolution I have formed to decline being considered among the number of those out of whom a choice is to be made. Right? I decline being considered among the number of those out of whom a choice is to be made. So of all the people, right, choose anybody but me, is what Washington is saying there. Now, he goes on to talk about a lot of things. He talks about the danger of parties in the state and so on. But reading his handwriting isn't exactly what we want to see there. So let's take a look at the text I have provided for you. Washington says, I have already intimated to you the danger of parties in the state, with particular reference to the founding of them on geographical discriminations. Again, he's basically saying there that I don't think political parties are a good thing for our country, especially now, but specifically parties that are formed along geographical areas, right? A pro-North party or a all-South party. He says this spirit, again, the spirit of forming parties, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature, having its root in the strongest passions of the human mind. It exists under different shapes in all governments, more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed, but in those of the popular form, it is seen in its greatest rankness and is truly their worst enemy, right? The people's worst enemy. And he talks about how when you have one party against another, there's always going to be a winner and there's always going to be a loser. And as one party gains strength, the other party is losing strength, and somehow it's going to try to do something to overcome the other party. It's going to try and defeat the other party somehow, and it's always going to result to nasty policies, nasty behaviors and actions and decisions. One of the things he says that it agitates the community. Oh, have to pause. I got a phone call. Excuse me. All right, sorry. Let's see where we left off. The idea of animosity of one party against another foments occasionally in riot and insurrection. It opens the door, he says, to foreign influence and corruption. Right? When one weak party needs something to overcome the other party, it opens up other countries to come in, and this weaker party will welcome. He thinks he fears other countries into making this all worse. So he says, thus the policy and the will of one country are subjected to the policy and will of another. And that's a good segue into his second warning, right? So Washington gives this big warning and says, basically, while I was president, I noticed that you were starting to form political parties. Stop. Don't do it. All right? That's warning number one. Warning number two, Washington says, the great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations and extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible, right? To have a commercial relationship is one thing. That's good. To have a political connection is bad, right? So far as we've already formed engagements, let them stop, right? Or sorry, let them be fulfilled with perfect faith. Here, let us stop, right? Again, so Washington's already made the proclamation of neutrality. That has a expiration date. The Jay Treaty obviously is a minor treaty. It's not like a treaty of true alliance. It's a treaty of friendship. The Pinckney Treaty was a treaty that allowed us to use the port of New Orleans. It allowed us to use the Mississippi River. It settled the border dispute. Those aren't big treaties. Those are specific and small, and even timely. But a treaty of alliance is bad, right? He says Europe has a set of primary interests which to us have none or a very remote relation, right? She's always involved in frequent controversies which are foreign to our concerns, right? Let them be Europe because they're always going to be screwed up. Focus on ourselves, right? He talks about our detached situation, giving ourselves an opportunity to focus on what the United States has. We have great resources, and if we use and utilize those resources, then we will be a great nation. We will be something to be contended with, but not if we're always involved in someone else's problems. Okay? So that is what I needed us to understand. And I encourage you to pause this and read this text fully on your own to get a sense of how Washington words his warning. But I want to recover the fact that there are two things that Washington wants us to avoid in the future. Right? Number one, right, the creation of political factions or parties. And two, the use of unnecessary foreign alliances, or the use of temporary alliances, as he said, for extraordinary purposes. Right? But unfortunately, our increased trade led us to close political alliances. We were forced into being somehow involved with France or Britain in one way or another. And we're going to see how this is even more difficult for Adams, the next president. And then as we learn, Jefferson couldn't escape them, and even Madison found that the only solution to our problems is to go to war with Great Britain again in 1812. And then we have political parties anyway. They have become, as Washington said, inseparable from our human nature and inseparable from our way of making laws, policies, decisions, and so on for running our country. Political parties have been constitutionally upheld in our system, and so they have a large part in our government. And we can see in Washington's farewell address how he is pro-union, anti-sectionalism, which is a Jeffersonian idea, anti-political parties, which is what both sides did, anti-excessive debt, which was a Hamiltonian wish, a desire, but Jefferson was okay with it because the state's paying off and it's no big deal. Pro-virtue, which comes from both sides, but pro-neutrality, right? A significant issue here. Hamilton wanted consolidation of power. Jefferson thought it was the devil. Okay, these are the things that Washington points out in his farewell address that are worth noting. But I need you to know that as we study Washington's farewell address, it is a perfect opportunity for us to look at the idea of isolationism, something Washington desired, something Washington challenged all of his future presidents to uphold, and how we would be challenged with trying to maintain isolationism through our next 5 presidents. That's it for today. Have a great day.